Hello, welcome to another video presentation of chesslecture.com. I am Attila Turzo, an international master from Hungary. In this lecture, we will study the basic ideas of the Pirc defense. The starting position of the Pirc defense will be in the board in some seconds. Let us start. White starts with e2, e4 with the king pawn. Black plays d7, d6. By this move, black controls the e5 square, and he plans to play knight f6 in the next move, and with d6 he wants to prevent the e4, e5 pawn advance, which would attack the f6 knight. After d6, white plays d2, d4, gaining space in the center. So in this defense, black allows white to get a nice center position, but after this, black wants to attack the center, first with the knight, so with knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn. Then the main move is knight c3 to defend the e4 pawn, and after knight c3, black plays g7, g6. And this is the starting position which we would like to study in this lecture. After g6, black plans to develop his bishop to g7, and from g7 the bishop attacks the d4 pawn, and later black would like to develop castle kingside, and after that position need to think about how to develop the king side, the queen side pieces, the c8 bishop or the b8 knight. The b8 knight many times goes to d7, and from d7 the knight supports the pawn advance, the e7, e5 pawn advance or the c7, c5 pawn advance, which would help the fight against the white center pawn on d4. So both the e5 move or both the c5 move fights against the d4 pawn. The c8 bishop sometimes develops on g4, especially if the white knight goes to f3, then the black bishop may try to pin the f3 knight or simply try to exchange for the knight, and without that bishop black has more space, because in this defense, that's very important, white has more space in the center and also sometimes in the king side, and black should be very careful to start a counterattack in time to have a playable position. So he should try to counterattack in the center with e5, or can play later for d5 by preparing with c7, c6, then played for d5, or black can play for c7, c5 to attack the d4 pawn. Sometimes black can gain space on the queen side. After c6, he can play b5, defending the c6 pawn, defend the b5 pawn, and then b4. Also possible to support the b pawn by a6 and then b5, and when the b5 moves, the c8 bishop many times may develop to b7 to attack the e4 pawn. Okay. Now we study the three main strategical ideas of the white player from this position. The first strategical idea can be to play for an early e4, e5 move in the center. This move has the advantage to gaining even more space in the center and in the king side and attacking the f6 knight, which need to go back to a positive position to d7 or e8 if it's castled. So this is one advantage, attacking the knight. The other advantage can be blocking the g7 bishop, because if white can build up a pawn chain, d4, e5 pawn chain, that would block the diagonal of the g7 bishop. So this is the two advantage of the e4, e5 move. And this idea can be played after f2, f4 move. So this is one variation which has to play the e4, e5 move. Other variation is to play bishop c1, g5, and then later to play e4, e5. And now, after if black captured on e5, white can capture back, and if the black queen captured on d1, then the white rook can capture back on d1, so it has a developed position. Compared to the early e5 example, if now white plays e5, then black simply captures, and if white captures back, then black capture on d1, and then the white knight should go back, or the king should capture, and that gives a nice position for black, at least equal position. So this is why bishop g5 is good, because after bishop g5, the rook can capture back on d1. So this can be the second way to have the e4, e5 advance. Or white can also play the bishop c4 move, with the idea to play in the next queen e2 to solve the problem of the queens on the d5, and after queen e2 to play e4, e5, and after the exchange, black cannot exchange the queens. And white may have the idea to even advance the e pawn till e6, trying to attack against the black king side. So this is the third main way to support the first basic idea, to play e4, e5. White can support it with f4 move, or with bishop g5, or with bishop c4 and then queen e2. The second main idea to play this position with white, to play against the king side, to play for a king side attack, because many times black plays bishop g7 and castle king side. To help in that, white can play bishop e3, and if black plays bishop g7, then white can start a kingside attack later with queen d2, with the idea to play bishop h6, exchange the g7 bishop, which may defend well the king, and then later try power storm on the king side with h4, h5, or sometimes with g4, but the g4 needed to be prepared by f3 to defend, and then g4, g5. So bishop e3, the first possibility to play for a kingside attack. After bishop e3, the knight may attack the bishop, but that's not a problem, because white can play bishop g5, having pressure on the queen and on the e7 pawn. And if black plays h6, then white can play bishop h4, and after g5, the bishop goes back to g3, and later white can attack with h2, h4, exchanging pawns on the king side, and may have a very good attacking chance of the open h5. White can immediately play f3 also to preventing the knight g4 move, and then planning to play bishop e3 and queen d2 with the same ideas. Also after f3, white may play for a g4, g5 attack. But this setup is mainly with the same ideas like the immediate bishop e3 move. So this was two moves, bishop e3 and f3, and the third, which can support the idea of attacking against the king, is bishop e2. With this move, white increase the pressure on the h5 square, and in the next moves can play for h4, h5, with the idea of opening the h5 for the rook. And then after exchange the pawns, may play bishop h6 to exchange the bishops and attack against the black king. So this is the second main strategy to attack against the king. We supported by bishop e3 and then queen d2 with the pawn storm on the king side. Also possible to play f3, and with the similar ideas to play bishop e3, and then queen d2 and h4, h5, or g4 also can be played after f3 because that's supported. And the third way to support the king side attacking ideas by bishop e2 and then h4, h5 attack on the king side. The third main strategy which can be played here for white is the classical setup, the classical strategy of controlling the center and developing all the pieces and then play for positional advantage. It can be played by knight f3, and then white may develop his bishop to e2, the other bishop to e3 or f4, and then castling king side, and later can think about to gaining space on the queen side with a4, a5. Sometimes it can play for e4, e5, gaining more space in the center. And sometimes white can change for a king side attack by moving the knight, f3 knight back to d2, and then the f pawn can move forward to f4 to support e4, e5 or f4, f5 attacks. So this was the last and main strategy which we studied in this lecture. The first strategy was to play for an early e4, e5 move. The second strategy was to play against the king side, against the black king, a king side attack, and the third strategy was to build up a classical position with knight f3 to attack the center. The other moves and other strategies from this position may go to one of these strategies. Example, in this position white may play also g2, g3, which will go to the strategy of controlling the center, because white may play bishop g2 in the next move to controlling the long diagonal, and then white's g1 knight can develop to e2, support the d4 pawn, and then white can later again gaining space with the f pawn to f4, f5 or e4, e5. White may also play here h2, h3, preventing bishop g4 move, and then but this move also follows to the classical idea, so it has no independence importance, because white will play knight f3 and bishop e2 following the classical strategy of gaining control on center. Against the strategies, against the first strategy, when white plays for early e4, e5, I think the best strategy for black is to try to play an early c7, c5 move to attack as soon as possible the center before white can get too much space advantage. Against the classical knight f3 strategy, I think for black is the best if play for c6, d5 to gaining control on e4 square and attack the center. And against the bishop e3 strategy, when white wants to play for kingside attack, I think the best for black to play c6 and then b5, b4, and attack, or c6, and instead of b5 we may play also queen b6 to try to attack as soon as possible against the queen side of white, so black gets enough counterplay. So thank you for your attention in this starting and basic lecture on the Pirc defense, and and I invite you to join us to look at other lectures where we study in details all the variations and strategies.